Ever thought about what happens to your short-term rental if your city decides to ban them? Last year alone, several major cities decided to ban short-term rentals.
In a late-night vote, the Dallas City Council approved a plan to eliminate most short-term rentals across the city.
It's a growing issue, but don't worry, I have the solutions to navigate through it. I own and operate several short-term rentals across the US in various metropolitan areas, and I have thought through all the contingencies if the ban hammer comes down on your short-term rental. Let's get into it. So the first thing I want to discuss is the various markets where you can actually buy a short-term rental. So there are your urban areas. So these are your city markets where you're trying to get traveling nurses, people who are visiting family, corporate stays, digital nomads. Those are your normal clientele for your urban markets. And then you have your drive to vacation destinations. So think lakes, think local amusement parks, think state parks, anything that you would drive to for a family vacation as a kid. Those are another market for short-term rentals. And then you have your fly to vacation destinations. So think Hawaii, think Disneyland, think Disney World, think national parks. So there are millions and millions of people that travel to these locations every single year, and they have a very strong demand for short-term rentals. So of those three markets, your fly to vacation, your drive to vacation, and your urban markets are far more susceptible to being banned. So these urban markets are where we're seeing a lot of bans coming in place. Those fly to and drive to vacation markets, they require tourism to actually keep their economy afloat. So they do not want to ban short-term rentals. So if you're buying your short-term rental in those locations, it's very unlikely that your short-term rental gets banned, and it's also likely that they already have rules and regulations in place for how they want to regulate short-term rentals in that market. So in 2023, Dallas banned short-term rentals. And there's several other cities in the US where short-term rentals are banned or difficult to operate. So New York City has banned short-term rentals. Las Vegas has essentially banned short-term rentals. And it's difficult to operate a short-term rental in New Orleans. There's some other cities that haven't banned short-term rentals but require you to get a short-term rental license. And if you actually go through the process of trying to file for the license, they aren't issuing any new licenses. So there's a bunch of other cities that have effectively banned short-term rentals. So if you're investing in an urban market, you really need to do your research to see what the legislation is like with regards to short-term rentals before you enter into that market. So let's talk strategy. So you bought in the urban market and there's potential for your short-term rental to be banned. So what should we do? So the first thing I would suggest is looking into selling the property. So not just selling it like you would normally sell it, I would suggest doing a 1031 exchange. So what a 1031 exchange allows you to do is take all the capital gains from your investment property and reinvest them into another investment property without paying any taxes. So you can 1031 exchange your short-term rental into a different asset class in that same market. So 1031 exchanging from your short-term rental into maybe a multifamily or just a single family that cash flows. So this 1031 exchange has a few rules around it. You would have to take the money from the sale of the property and provide it to a qualified intermediary. So you can't actually take the funds from the sale of the property. They have to go to a qualified intermediary. And then within 45 days of selling the property, you have to identify up to 3 other properties that you're going to consider closing on. And then within 180 days of your sale of the property, you need to actually close on one of those properties that you identified. But if you meet all those requirements, you can sell your short-term rental and pivot into a different asset class or into a different market entirely. So the next pivot you can consider is just not operating your house as a short-term rental. So instead of operating it as a short-term rental where your guests are staying for 30 days or less, you can operate it as a mid-term rental. So they're staying for 30 days or more. So the cash flow for a mid-term rental is very close to the cash flow that you would see from a short-term rental. And in some markets, it's nearly identical or even higher to operate as a mid-term rental. The biggest drawback to this is that you're going to have higher vacancies between guests. So you need to ensure that you're accounting for that in your budget. You're going to have higher maintenance costs associated with those consumable items in your home, such as body wash, your shampoo, your shower gels, any snacks and stuff. You're gonna have to probably change out all your sheets. You might go through your comforters and bedding materials much faster, towels, washcloths. So you need to factor that into your budget. But the medium-term rental strategy is a very easy pivot. So on Airbnb, you would just change your minimum stay number to 30 days, and then another platform that I would advocate listing your home on would be Furnish Finder. So Furnish Finder is a website that a lot of traveling nurses and working professionals go to, and they get housing from here while they're working. So those listings are not generally at the same quality and caliber of what you would see on Airbnb. So if you have a quality Airbnb listing and you transition it to Furnish Finder, it will stand out and it's likely that it will get booked. So another option is to just go the long-term route. So instead of renting out a month or 2 at a time, now you're getting guests in your home for 1-year leases. So the benefit of this is it's legal everywhere. There's very few places in the US where you cannot rent out your home long term. So you're not going to run into any of the legislation and bans that you would normally see. The only issues you can run into are local municipalities or HOAs. So some local municipalities and some HOAs try and restrict renting to tenants. And that's something you would have to look into before you buy your home in an HOA or municipality. So a good way to crunch the numbers on if your home would cash flow as a long-term rental is taking the address and plugging it into a website called Rentometer. So if you go to Rentometer and you plug in the address for your home, it will give you what the expected rent should be for that home. And it will give you a range for what the lower 20% of homes are making and what the top percentage of homes are making. So it gives you a realistic expectation of the income. So let's talk about the silver tsunami. So the silver tsunami is a metaphor for the aging demographics in the world. So in the United States, baby boomers So in 2020, there were 55.8 million people age 65 or older. And that was up almost 40% from 2010. And this trend is not exclusive to the US. So the World Health Organization predicts that the number of people age 60 worldwide will increase from 1 billion to 2.1 billion by the year 2050. This older demographic is going to need a place to stay. So this concept is called a group home. So group homes allow for the elderly, the mentally ill, kids and teens, or people with autism to stay in a house. So a lot of times if you run a group home, those businesses can generate hundreds of thousands of dollars per year. And if you don't want to go into a full-on business operating a group home out of your home, that's understandable because a lot of legal requirements and permitting that you have to meet to operate a group home out of your house. And that process can take up to a year to complete. So if you don't want to operate the business, it is actually possible to reach out to group home operators and rent your home to them. So a lot of times when you rent out your house to a group home operator, you can charge them 1.5 or up to 2 times what the normal market rent will be. So whatever number you saw for the long-term rental, multiply that by 1.5 or 2 times, and that is what you could potentially get by renting out your home to a group home operator. But the one thing that you need to be cautious about is that your insurance rates could go higher if your insurance provider determines that you're renting the house to a group home. You also want to make sure you discuss with the group home operator who is going to do the modifications to your home. You don't want to be stuck footing the bill for any modifications or any repairs that need to be done if a group home is renting out your house. They're going to be a lot tougher on your home, and you're going to have a lot more repairs to your home than you would with a traditional tenant. But that's okay because you can make up for it by having them do that maintenance. If you want this group home strategy to be a potential pivot for your short-term rental business, you want to make sure you're selecting the right type house. So a lot of group homes operators are looking for a one level, so a ranch style home that has 4 bedrooms and 2 to 3 baths. If you want the group home strategy to be your contingency plan. So the best time to plan for if your short-term rental gets banned is before you actually purchase the short-term rental, but the next best time is now. Make sure you're putting that plan together and lining up those contingencies before the worst possible thing happens. If you were looking at just pure speed of implementation of these strategies, the medium term and the long term rental strategies will be the quickest. And then the next quickest would be selling the home. And then the final one I would say would be either starting your own group home business or finding a group home operator. But as housing affordability starts to slip away from most people, we have a nation of renters. So there's a lot of pent-up demand for long-term rentals in a lot of markets. So it is not difficult to get a long-term renter in place. And there is a unsatisfied demand for midterm rentals as well. There are a ton of digital nomads and working professionals who need those services. I provide all the details on how to locate the highest grossing Airbnb properties in a given market in my previous video on finding a 100K per year revenue property. So feel free to check that out. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.